As an employee, you should absolutely not discuss your pay and compensation package with other employees at your company. Do you know how many people I instantaneously triggered with that one sentence and are now diving for the comments section to tell me that an employee's right to discuss their pay is protected by federal law and that employees absolutely should discuss their pay? Here's the deal. All those people that are headed to the comments, they're right. Even though they're right, some companies still have policies that forbid employees discussing their pay and compensation package with other employees at the company. So if you are an employee or an employer, what should you do? You're being asked not to discuss it by many employers. But then the law says, in most cases, you are allowed to discuss it. So what the hell do you do? And by the way, this isn't legal advice. I'm just some dude on the internet talking, definitely not a lawyer, and certainly not your lawyer. Now, why would employers not want you discussing your pay with other employees? Some people are immediately going to jump to the reason that the employer is in some way taking advantage of somebody. Maybe he's paying a minority less, or paying a woman less, or paying some guy less, or whatever. And that does happen. There are employers who just don't pay right. And yeah, there are some employers that are like that. But if I'm given the choice to believe whether or not somebody is evil or lazy, most of the time I'm going to go with lazy because, well, evil takes effort. And most people are lazy. So let's go with that assumption for the rest of the video. Now, to make this point, I'm going to give you a real life example from my company that happened about 2 years ago. I employed 2 women. The first woman was a recent college graduate. I was her first job after college. She came into the company looking to be not a lab technician, but a lab technician's assistant, which means that she's just there to learn and to do the repetitive thing while the lab technician is doing more important work. So she comes into the company with 0 experience, has some education under her belt, but doesn't know anything about what's going on in the lab. So she walks in the door at about 18 bucks an hour. Now at the same time, I hired a completely different woman, and she had radically different experience. Number one, she hadn't graduated with an associate's or bachelor's in her trade. She had graduated with a master's in human resources. And we were hiring her to be the office manager, not the assistant to a technician. And whenever you looked at her job experience, she had worked at some really impressive places and brought some great results. When we checked with her references, they all described her as a beast. And in the interview, it became very, very clear she was a beast, and we wanted her on our team. So as you can imagine, she didn't come in at the same pay rate as the laboratory technician's assistant. Now, the environment at work is very, very friendly, and these two went out one night drinking. And as the drinks flowed, so did the stories, and pay rates got swapped. Now, I had no idea that these two had gone out drinking, and I had no idea that they'd swapped stories while they were inebriated. But the next day, the laboratory technician had a little bit of an attitude with me, and I noticed it. And at first I let it slide because, well, everybody has bad days. But as the day progressed, the attitude got worse and worse and worse. Now, I'm not the type of person that lets shit like that slide. You don't get to come in and do that stuff. So I called the laboratory technician's assistant into my office. And because we're going to be discussing some disciplinary issues, I also brought in our newly hired HR person, which coincidentally was the person she'd been out drinking with last night. I make it a point that anytime we're going to have disciplinary issues, there's always 2-person integrity. So the person I'm talking to and a witness. That way there's no accusations later. And the best part is there's also a camera in my office that's recording in the cloud all the time, so no surprises later. None of us have time to get caught up in some sort of scandal or something like that. So as I called her into my office and we all sat down, I'm a fairly direct person, so I just looked at her and said, "Did I do something to piss you off?" Cue big eyeballs from the HR person because I'm being a little bit more direct than maybe HR people would want me to be. And the laboratory technician's assistant looks at me and goes, "No?" And I was like, "Well, you've had a bit of an attitude for the entirety of the day, and I'm not inclined to put up with it because it seems to be getting worse instead of better. So is there something you would like to tell me? Maybe I've in some way offended you or slighted you or something, and you want to let me know that so I can have the opportunity to rectify it." So she kind of took a deep breath, looked me right in my eyes and says, "Well, I just think that it's bullshit that you'll pay one woman in the office one amount and another woman in the office drastically more. Like I'm somehow less of a person because I work in the laboratory, but she deserves a whole bunch of money because she works in the office." She went on to expound upon the fact that they were both hired roughly at the same time, and that in her eyes, this was bullshit. She deserved equal pay in the workplace. Now, I'll remind you that she's comparing her equal pay to another female. So this isn't like a sexist thing where I would pay a man more or a woman less. She's comparing herself to another member of the staff that is the same sex that she is. Now, I'll point out that while she is saying equal pay, she is comparing herself to another woman in the office. She's upset that another woman is making more than she is. So this leads to why I used to not like it when employees talked about pay, because it creates these sort of difficult and uncomfortable situations where I have to say something to somebody that's the truth, but it's going to hurt their feelings. And before, those made me uncomfortable. But I've been doing this long enough that now it's just rip the Band-Aid off. Here we go. So I had to explain a few things to her about why the office manager makes more than a laboratory technician's assistant. Number one, the office manager is her superior. It does not make any sense for the office manager and a lab tech assistant to make the same amount of money when one reports to the other and is higher up in the food chain within the company. The second thing I explained to her is, well, you have a bachelor's degree, she has a master's degree, and that education carries more value in the workplace. She starts to say something, but I'm already beginning my sentence, so I inadvertently cut her off, and I explained that the office manager has 7 years of high-powered experience, whereas she has 0. The experience listed on her resume and application was literally babysitting. She worked as a babysitter as she made her way through college. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not on the same level of experience as managing a 20-person staff salon and day spa. The two are not even in the same league. And here's where it gets tricky. I had to explain that the office manager has a higher value because of her personality. She's more aggressive. She does sales better. She's not shy to ask questions. And because she's more aggressive and has a better rapport with the customers and can dictate the way that the conversation is going, she has a higher value to me. And here's a fun one for you. The girl that has the master's degree, that I pay more, that runs my entire office, that I trust with my entire business, she also speaks 3 languages. So guess what? She has a higher value because of that. So now listen, it's possible that I've made a mistake. I could have inappropriately judged her level of experience. I could have read her resume wrong. Maybe she didn't put something on her resume. So let's take this moment to find out what her experience is. And I looked at her and I said, now if there's something you left off of your resume or some level of experience that you have that I'm not aware of, go ahead and let me know, and if it's relevant, we can adjust your pay. To that, the only thing I heard was crickets. And then she started crying. Hence, the me being uncomfortable. Now back then, I didn't want to have that conversation. That conversation put me in a very uncomfortable spot. Number one, I was ill prepared for it because the topic of the meeting was sprung on me very, very quickly. It transitioned from her having an attitude to justifying her pay, and I didn't have any time to prepare for that meeting. Now, me being uncomfortable is a defect with me, not with anybody else, and that's something that I had to work through. So now, why am I completely comfortable with employees discussing their pay? It's because I've set up my company in such a way that this conversation is now much easier for me. I've set the company up to where your pay is a direct reflection of your revenue generation for the company or your value to the company. Now, there's a couple of other things that go into that calculation besides revenue generation. They include things like customer complaints, customer compliments, how clean you keep your vehicle, how well you take care of your tools, and of course, any qualifications or state licenses that you have that would give you a bump. And don't forget languages. If you speak additional languages, you get paid additional money. So how do I deal with this now? When employees come to me and they're upset about their pay, I sit them down and I explain exactly how their pay is based. And if they want more money, then that means that we need to do something with them that's going to increase their value to the company. Because if your value for the company is higher, you should be paid more. So the conversation is able to be steered very quickly, not to, why don't I make the same as that, is, hey, why not we figure out where you want to go in the company and get you the necessary training. When you accomplish that and you now present a higher value, we can pay you more. Now, the most important part of that entire process is making sure that the employee knows how to execute those changes so that they can accomplish their goal. And that goal needs to be broken down. It may be a bigger goal to say, get a state license, but we need to break it down into pieces that are bite-sized so the employee doesn't feel overwhelmed. More or less, you have to give the employee a roadmap of success on where they need to get to accomplish their financial and professional goals. So to wrap all this up, should you or should you not talk about your pay with other employees? Because really, whether or not your boss is uncomfortable with that conversation shouldn't play into your decision. But there are a few things that should play into your decision onto whether or not you're going to discuss your pay. You have to understand that while there are positives to talking about your pay, there are also some negatives, and you're going to have to deal with those negatives if you decide to run your mouth. Number one, and you already know this, it's going to create drama in the company. That's going to spread like wildfire. Nobody keeps their mouth shut at an office, let alone the guys in the field. Everybody's going to know what you make, and then they may interpret their superiority based on pay. It's going to create drama in the office. If you talk about pay, you may not like the answer you get, both from your coworkers and from your boss. If you're not prepared for that conversation, maybe don't start that conversation. And finally, right or wrong, you may be fired. I know plenty of employers that if you run your mouth about pay, you're fired. Oh, and if your managers aren't top notch, talking about your pay isn't going to make you friends with them. It's going to create issues. Now, I just mentioned that you may be fired for talking about your pay. So you may say, well, James, you just said that my right to talk about my pay is protected by law, and if my employer fires me for that, then I could sue him and get lots of money. And the fact of the matter is everybody runs their mouth about suing people and hiring lawyers. In the end, very few people sue. Number one, you don't have a source of revenue now, and lawyers are expensive. Remember, it's the majority of the personal injury attorneys that take cases on contingency. A lot of the labor lawyers, they want payment up front. Why do they want payment up front? Because a lot of these lawsuits aren't won. A lot of these lawsuits never go to court. The lawyers wouldn't get paid. Number two, are you really ready to shell out $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $12,000 to sue your past employer when your biggest thing right now is providing for your family? Is that the best use of your money? Sure, there may be a windfall later, but right now, you got $5,000 to spare? And then, even if it goes to court, the majority of the people that are going to make money is the lawyers. Your employer's going to lose and you're going to lose. So while I do think you should sue if you've been wronged, sometimes financially it's not the best choice for you. So I will leave you guys with 2 questions that you can answer in the comments. Number 1, do you discuss your pay with your coworkers? And number 2, when you find out that a coworker that does the same job as you is making more money, does that piss you off? Or are you happy for them? Let me know in the comments. So as you jump in the comments and let me know all these things, you should know that I'm going to pick a random commenter that is also a subscriber and contact them to send them some free merch. Y'all have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later. The best way to support the channel is hit the like and subscribe button. I'll see you next time.